Just waiting for that notification thing to go away. Hello everybody again. So this will be the third part. Hopefully this one won't be as long as the second one. And I'm sorry if it is in advance. So for this video, it's kind of covering just Mileena's whole play as a whole. Like her whole meta, the layers of her meta, her post-block game, her mix-ups, and everything of that sort. So to cover Mileena in a nutshell, what she is, she's very, very safe in the strings that she uses, but she will not open anybody up with just her strings. Like, the way that she opens people up is, a lot of it is baiting and conditioning, and within grabs. Because her 50-50 is a factor in her game. It's always something that she's able to throw out, provided she has meter for the overhead. But it's not something that she has to go for. But it does add onto the whole mix-up game that she has. And I say mix-up and not 50-50, just because it isn't a 50-50. It's not like a Devora game, you know. It's not like you're guessing between the low and the overhead the entire time, or it's not like you're facing against Sonya or Jax, where you're constantly guessing, do I block up, down, you know, it's like, what am I doing? For her, it's more of, when do I press a button? Because she jails you without actually jailing. She isn't Johnny Cage, and even though she's +2 on moves like, 1, 1-2, 1-2-3, forward 1, and so on and so forth, and forward 3, even though she's plus, she isn't jailing it with the follow-up. Like, her next move will not guarantee her hit. Albeit it does give her a lot of advantage, but it doesn't guarantee anything. So the thing that I want to cover with her is mostly her stuff on block. Wrong thing again. Because there is no interruption between back 1-2, and because back 1 is only -2, one of the ways that she opens people up, or her meta from this, is, will she go for the side? Will she do nothing? And as you can see, she has almost no blocks on a lot of the stuff that she does. So one way to open people up with this is, if you're constantly doing back 1-2, you can all of a sudden do back 1 and then open them up to a grab. Or do back 1, do back 1-2 again, or back 1, just keep on doing back 1s, making them continually guess as to when to do it. Because she is negative. She is -2. She's not plus, she isn't neutral. But because she has so much mix-up off of it, because of the stagger and how good the stagger is, on top of it having no blocks done, she is at liberty to do that, provided that you condition them enough to respect her to do that. Or you can do back 1, go into another string, into making her plus, and then capitalizing it and taking advantage of that even more so. So that's kind of back 1 and back 1-2 as a whole. And it's roughly the same with back 2-1, where back 2 and back 2-1, they're both -4. So they both have the same frames of disadvantage. So if you're constantly doing back 2-1, you can suddenly do back 2, and again, go for the throw. And the reason why I mention throw a lot is because it's not guaranteed, in a sense that you don't have a guaranteed throw, but whether or not they're blocking or not, unless you're crouching, the throw will hit them. It is going to grab them. And it doesn't matter if they tech it or not, they still receive a little bit of damage, and now you're at a good enough space where you can go for back 1-2, forward 2, spacing out with the side, and so on and so forth. And the thing with grabbing is that it does grab people out of pokes. It does grab people out of normals and moves and even some specials. So, you do have that. Again, like before, you can go into another string, you can go into another move. And because it has very little blocks done, you are at liberty to do so. Because unless they're mashing out an option selecting move, like option selecting jumps or pokes or armor, that's what leads to the whole bait, where if you know that they're constantly option selecting it, you can just stop halfway through, wait for them to commit to whatever it is that they're mashing, and then punish them for it. To the point where you teach them to respect you, where it's like, you're not gonna mash. If it's not your turn, it's not your turn. So, and that's kind of what her entire game revolves around. So there's that with back 2-1, and it's roughly the same exact thing with every other move. It's the same with forward 1, you can go for back 1-2, go for a mix-up, go for 1-2, go for the grab. It's the same with forward 4, forward 3-4, roughly the same. Forward 1-2, back 4. This is -6, but because you can cancel out of it, because it is safe against everybody but Kano or Reptile, you know, nobody's getting anything out of it. And okay, I'll cover this afterwards, but you know, nobody's gaining anything out of it other than checking you, in which you can either armor or backdash. And you know, if you constantly respect them, I mean, if you constantly force them to respect you, that's what leads to, you know, like constantly getting out like little pokes, getting out like little checks, you know, stuff like that. You can go for 2 and up 4, just because, like I mentioned before, you have so little blocks done that they need to be on point. Like, they need to know exactly when. They need to make that read as to when you're going to stop your pressure and then go for their stuff afterwards. Because if they're trying to fuzzy everything that you do, they're literally never going to get their chance to move. Just because the time difference, because she's only like -2, -1, -4, because it is such a little period of time, by the time that they're expecting that next move, she's already neutral or she's already plus, and she's already going into her next move by the time that they're waiting for their turn to do something. So there's that. With forward 4, it's the same thing. You know, it's like guessing between either doing forward 4-4, forward 4 into Psy, or just doing forward 4 on its own. And it's kind of the same exact thing with every single move that she does, with all the other strings that I covered in part 2. It's kind of the same exact scenario against everything. It's just, you know, is she going to go for a poke? Is she going to go for back 1? Is she going to go for a plus string, a grab, a special, and so on and so forth. And the one thing that I did want to cover, that I mentioned while I was covering forward 1-2, back 4, was off of everything that she is safe on, she always has the option of going into her armor. So if you condition people, like especially after 2 and up 4, like this is like a staple that almost every Mileena player does. If you condition them to respect the armor, especially if you constantly have meter, then it lets you just like take advantage of their fear that much more. And that's what I mean by her jailing, by not truly jailing, because you are at liberty to move. You know, the opponent can do something about it. Everybody does have options, but it's just that if you play her right, if you play her well enough, that you get into the other person's head so well, you can pretty much just like take advantage. You can control the entire pace of the match because she is able to do so. But it's not because she's abusing anything. The only thing that she's really abusing is the fear of the other player. That's really what it is that she's capitalizing on. And that's kind of her whole play, you know, entirely. Or like what I was showing before in the specials, like if you're whiffing rolls and you constantly go into the armor, you can whiff it, not do nothing. If they're just stand blocking, you can just grab them from it. Or you can backdash, you can low poke, you know, and so on and so forth. When it comes to her air game, if they're constantly trying to challenge you in the air, you can cancel into an air side, you can preemptively do a neutral jump punch. If you're over here, and you're jumping in, and they constantly try to anti-air you, like as you're coming down, you can cancel into the telekick and punish them for it. And you can do it enough so that they stop altogether, so that you do now, you know, capitalize on them respecting your air game, so now you can jump in and go in for a full string on block. Or you can jump in and get a grab out of it. Because the thing with her that I've been doing a lot more lately, and what I realize is going to work a lot of the time, is that you're going to need to grab people. If you're going to play her safe, if you're going to play her well, and you're going to play her smart, you will need to grab people a lot. But not to the point where you're just gonna, like, everything that you do is a grab, you know, because then they'll just read it, neutral duck, and punish you for it. But, you know, play it smart where if you're constantly going for a full-blown string, like forward 1-2, back 4, you know, the smart thing to do would be stagger the forward 1 and then go for the grab afterwards. It's not wise, in my opinion, to do forward 1-2, back 4 and go into a grab, just because it is unsafe, you know. Like, you're not plus it. This is -6, -7, respectively. So, you know, it's only something to throw out. It's only viable, in my opinion, or it's only smart to do so if you condition them to respect your follow-up. Which is, now, one thing that I wanted to cover with forward 1-2, back 4 specifically. forward 1-2 back 4, the cancel advantage is only 4 frames. So if you're not doing roll, everybody can interrupt low psi, standing psi, and they can interrupt the telekick, unless you're committing into the roll. So if you have somebody that's constantly respecting you, and then they counter poke afterwards a little time after, canceling into the telekick beats out most counter pokes for a punish. It also catches people that are trying to neutral jump punch, that are trying to jump out, that are trying to jump back. If they backdash, it makes you land right in front of their face, and you both be relatively neutral afterwards. And also, for people that like to armor a lot, because most armored moves have like a wonky type of hitbox, like it's usually like they ascend or they crouch first and then they launch up, kind of like Johnny Cage's his nut punch. Actually, let me show that for you. As you can see, by the time it comes out, the telekick will punish it, or the telekick will hit the hit of the armor, but as they're recovering, you can still either cancel into the psi, or wait until you land and then follow up from it afterwards. But obviously some other wake-ups like this, not wake-ups, but armor, will not create that same scenario. But like that, as you can see how that happens. So that is the additional mix-up that you gain off of doing forward 1-2 back 4, where it's canceling into your specials and knowing which special to cancel into, so that you can punish them for, you know, doing a move. And I think that that's kind of just about it. Like, I was covering it before with like 1-2-4, where canceling certain specials, you know, like you can gain something out of it, but with others you cannot. So like within those matchups where the reversal is too good, or their normals and their pokes are just too good to compete against, you can just do 1-2-4 on its own and just bait them for it. Or like with the 1-2-3, where there was a gap after crouch blocking, again you can just bait the 1-2, bait the reversal, and then punish them afterwards for it. And now when it comes to her meta, I covered this a little bit in the specials portion, but when it comes to her meta, when it comes to zoning, if they're not a teleporter, and even if they are, the way that you want to do it is you kind of want to just keep on throwing out straight size, just because they have better recovery and better frame data than her low size. And like I was mentioning before, the way that I play her, and the way that I usually play my game, period, is I just want as much meter as I can have, and I want to chip them out as much as I can, just because I want to frustrate them. I want them to, you know, be impulsive. I want them to get very antsy, so that I can take advantage of how frantic they're being. So doing this, what it's going to do is it's going to condition people to block. It's either they're going to block crouching, or they're going to neutral duck it, in which once they start doing that, you can start throwing out low size, just because it's going to start chipping them or hitting them. And then when they're trying to guess in between the two, between, you know, like crouching, you know, do I block, do I not block, you can throw out that telekick. It's on a hard read. I do it on hard reads. 9 out of 10 times I do catch people with it, just because I get an understanding as to how it is that they're blocking, as to what it is that they're expecting out of it, and then it lets them move in. Or you can just keep on doing that, and if they constantly don't know whether to crouch block or not, or whether to just crouch normally, that's what lets you chip them even with this, even though they can just duck it. And then you can spend a bar to gain more frames of advantage, and so on and so forth. And if they're pressed up against the wall, I usually start like creeping forward, like I do this. I start, you know, like inching my way in as I'm zoning, baiting for them to jump so that I can either ball roll them out of the air, I can telekick, I can do an air slide to catch them. And that's kind of what you want to do with her, like in general. You just want them to react. Like you should always be reacting to their reaction, and their reaction should always be how you want them to play. And that's, in a nutshell, how you want to play her, and how you should play her, where you want them to move at the time that you want them to move, if that makes sense. Like, if they start jumping, it's because you want them to jump. If they start counter poking or reversing armor, it's because you want them to do so. Because you have the tools and you have the means to bait it and to punish it afterwards. So there's that, and then also again with the zoning, something that I do, like if they're constantly blocking and they're trying to creep their way in, I'll just do this, I'll start zoning, and then all of a sudden run up and grab them. Which also keeps them on their toes, especially if they're like within this range and you're, you know, like you're constantly trying to zone and you're trying to throw out size and they're like inching their way in, just run up and grab. And that's like the best way that I can interpret trying to break her down. Just because a lot of it, a huge chunk of it, is player versus player. Because she has the tools to deal with just about every single scenario, except for Grandmaster, just because it's just a wall of stupidness, in my opinion. Like, it's retarded because it doesn't act like an orb. It's a full, like, it's just a full planted pillar of just, like, you can't get through. Like, it's very, very situational, the kind of things that he does, and Sub-Zero can play it completely safe if he feels like it. You know, it's like, it's not my fault, it's not anybody's fault if the Sub-Zero player decides to be unsafe and reckless. That's not our fault, because you don't have to do so with your character. But aside from that matchup, you have the tools to deal with everything. However, you don't have the tools to abuse every single thing. She doesn't have, in my opinion, too many winning matchups. She does have winning matchups, like Katana, for example. I think she wins against Sonya, possibly, against Kenshi, Kodo, and various other characters. But a huge chunk of her matchups are even. And due to the fact that they are even, and due to how versatile she is as a character, is why I say a lot of it is going to be player versus player. Because let's say Johnny Cage does his jailing strings and you're counter poking, or you're trying to poke or roll or use your armor. She has all these options, but you know, if he baits them out, all of a sudden your options become a liability to you. So then you're gonna have to go for something more risky, you know, like go for a roll, go for a grab, try to jump out. And it's kind of like that in a lot of her matchups and a lot of her even ones, where both characters have the tools, they have the means to deal with one another, but you have better control, in my opinion, as a Mileena player, to establish the pace of the match by baiting them. Like I was saying before, you really don't want to be the one reacting to the stuff that they do, unless it is the reaction that you want them to make. And that's just her as a whole. And I think that that's kind of it for this portion of the video, because now I'll just cover the Oki and any other little bits that I forgot to mention. Oh, before I go, also with this, like the meta between her telekick, you can mix it up between doing just a plain telekick, in which the best that they can do would be poke or an uppercut, or you can burn it, in which it creates a much tighter window for them to get anything out, or it will hit them. Or if you have full bar, you can see how late I can input the X-ray. You can either jail the X-ray in, like it actually jails, like they can't do anything about it, or you can delay it slightly, or if you see them moving or they start up an attack, you can cancel it into it afterwards. So yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all that I really wanted to cover when it came to her general gameplay. Just because a lot of it really is, it's all dependent on how the match is going and dependent on the kind of player that you're facing. But yeah, I hope that this has been of use, and take care.